Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at doing the hologram project, and I'm going to do this in Photopea instead of Photoshop. But before I start, I will show you in Photoshop close to what one of the finished examples will look like, something like that, so we have an idea what we're working towards. So let's go back to Photopea. I'm going to use the same image. We'll open this picture, and the first thing we want to do is remove the background. So for this one, I am going to use the background eraser tool. I'm right clicking, going to make my brush bigger, and just use a regular brush should be fine. And what the background, or what this tool does, is allow you to erase only the background. The idea is that it should be able to recognize what's your main image and not erase that. Now this is going to be a hologram, so it's going to get a little fuzzy and messy. So as with a lot of these projects, if you don't erase perfectly, it's going to be okay. So we got a chunk of the background erased now. I'm going to go to the next tool, which is just regular eraser tool. And I'm going to make it larger. And let me make my picture bigger here. Control plus to do that. And I'm going to go and make sure it's a soft brush, just like we've used so many times before. And I'm just going to go around and clean this up. And again, we're going to lose a little bit of our picture, but that should not be a problem. Now in Photopea, remember, if you need to move the picture side to side, you hold your space bar down, go to your move tool, and you just drag it like that. So let's go back to our eraser. And I'm going to get this pretty close. Might not be perfect, but there's nothing more boring than watching me erase the background of a picture. So I'll get it pretty close, not perfect. Again, to move the picture over, hold the space bar and just drag it over like that. All right, so we got that removed fairly good. Now to get your picture back to normal size, Control and the number 0 is the shortcut for that, or you can always do plus and minus. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is to create 2 additional copies. So Control J, Control J. All right, then the instructions say name the layers from top to bottom 1 through 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, now create a solid black color layer below the bottom layer because we want to put a black background here. So I'm going to make a brand new layer, and I'm going to make sure my color is black. And I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, which is always with our gradient tool here. Paint that layer black, but we need to move it to the bottom. Whatever. Okay, so you can see the areas where I did not erase too well. Let's see how that's going to affect us. We're going to keep moving through the project and see how that looks in the end. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is create the hologram lines. Now, if you remember the glitch project we did last year, we downloaded some lines off the internet. This time I'm going to show you how to make them, and it's pretty easy. So I'm going to create a brand new layer on top of everything, and I want the color to be gray. All right, so I'm going to select a light gray color, click OK, use my paint bucket tool, and I filled it gray. Okay. Now, the thing before we start making our lines, you want to watch out. The foreground color needs to be black, and the background color is white. So I have those set like that. Step 6, we are going to make sure we're on that layer, and we're going to go to Filter, Filter Gallery. And you'll notice this does not have as many options as Photoshop has, but it has the one that we need. So we're going to go to halftone pattern, and we're going to do our settings to 115 in pattern type line. So I got 115, whoops, and our pattern type is line. All right, and then click OK. Now we're going to turn that layer off. We're going to turn layers 1 and 2 off, and we're just going to be using layer 3 right now. So we're going to blur this. We're going to go to our blur effect, which you've done before, but we're going to go filter, blur. We're going to use a motion blur this time. And on Photopea, my settings are going to be different than Photoshop, but on the instructions I've given you both. So this stays at 0, and our distance we're going to do about 60 px, which means pixels. All right, so that's good. Now we're going to turn on and select layer 2. We're going to go to filter, same thing, motion blur. We're going to do this one a little less, only about 20 pixels, somewhere around there is good. And then we're going to turn on layer 1, and for now we're going to adjust the opacity at about 70%. 70%, and whoops, back to layer 2. I said to adjust that to about 80% for now. Okay, about 80%. So if we turn them all off, we can see what each one does. And like I say, we might want to go back and adjust this layer a little bit later. Okay, so we're going to turn the scan lines on now, and we're going to adjust this opacity to somewhere around 30% right now. Okay, now we're going to go back to layer 3. And we're going to use our move selection tool because we want to select that image. And we're going to use these handles here. You want to make sure show transform controls box is set. And we're going to pull this image out just a little bit to create that glowing hologram effect. Hit enter. And step 13, we're going to go to layer 2, and we're going to do the same thing for that. Just pull it out a little bit like that. And then we are going to go up here, select the top layer. We're going to want a hue and adjustment saturation layer, or a hue and saturation adjustment layer, sorry, hue and saturation. So we're going to add a little bit of a bluish green color to it, which sometimes you see with holograms. So in Photopea, we're going to adjust our saturation up. That way we can see our colors. Whoops, you want to make sure you hit the colorize button too. And these are all in your instructions. So I'm going to give it that bluish color. And then I'm going to go back and adjust the opacity with this one here. I'm going to lower the opacity. And this is where you can experiment with it a little bit. Get it to where you think it looks good. And you can go back to all these layers and you can experiment with the opacity on those too. And the last thing I look at doing for this, let's go back to Photoshop and check. All right, so we got it pretty much in the ballpark as the sample I did years ago in Photoshop. You notice the edges are a little blacker in there, so what you can do, last step, go to your scan lines, take a soft eraser, or soft one, make it pretty big like that. And we're going to lower the opacity of the eraser tool down to about 29%, something like that. And we're going to start erasing the edges, just the edges of our scan line. And what this does is allow the black to show through, and it will make the image appear that it's glowing also. So it gives it more of that hologram effect. Now this is just step 1 of this project. We are going to have step 2 where we actually go and apply this hologram to another image. For instance, I'll show you how to put her on a building. But for now, if we check against Photoshop, looks somewhat in the ballpark. And again, you might need to adjust some of this depending on how you want it to look. And you're going to go to export it as a JPEG. You go File, Export as a JPEG. And I would also save this as a PSD. So if you need to come back when we do part 2, you have all your layers and make any adjustments.